My family kicked me out of Christmas dinner, so I bought the restaurant they were eating at. I never expected to find myself owning an upscale bistro out of spite, but after years of emotional manipulation and rejection, it felt like poetic justice to watch their faces when they realized who their new landlord was. To understand how things reached this breaking point, you need to know about my complicated relationship with my stepmother and the family that gradually pushed me to the sidelines. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I was born when my father was just 25, a struggling artist who hadn't planned on becoming a parent so young. My mother, Elena, passed away from complications during childbirth, leaving my father, James, to raise me alone. From what my grandmother told me, those early years were a blur of grief, determination, and love. Dad put his artistic dreams on hold and took a corporate job to provide stability for us. Despite working long hours, he always made time for bedtime stories, weekend adventures, and creating a home filled with laughter and warmth. When I was 7, Dad met Vanessa at a company fundraiser. She was elegant, ambitious, and worked in the marketing department. Their relationship moved quickly, and within a year, they were engaged. I was excited to have a mother figure in my life, even though Vanessa seemed more interested in my father than in building a relationship with me. Still, I made effort after effort to connect with her, making homemade cards, asking about her day, even trying to learn about marketing so we'd have something to talk about. "Olivia," my grandmother warned me once, "don't try so hard with someone who isn't trying back." But I was young and hopeful, convinced that if I just found the right approach, Vanessa would come to love me as much as she loved my dad. The wedding was lavish, far more extravagant than anything we'd done before. Dad seemed happy, and I was determined to be supportive, even when I overheard Vanessa complaining to her friends about having to, quote, deal with someone else's child. I told myself she was just nervous about becoming a stepmother, that things would improve once we settled into our new life together. For a while, we existed in a polite stalemate. Vanessa wasn't cruel, just distant. She'd acknowledge my achievements with a perfunctory, "That's nice," and attend my school events when Dad insisted. But there was always a sense that she was merely tolerating my presence. Dad, caught between his love for me and his desire to make his new marriage work, started working even longer hours, perhaps hoping that if he provided enough financially, the emotional gaps wouldn't matter as much. Everything changed when Vanessa became pregnant 3 years after the wedding. Dad was ecstatic, and even I felt excited about having a sibling. I imagined teaching a little brother or sister all sorts of things, having someone to share the holidays with, forming the kind of bond I'd always envied in my friends with siblings. Vanessa's attitude toward me shifted during her pregnancy, but not in the way I'd hoped. Instead of drawing closer as we prepared to welcome a new family member, she became increasingly critical of everything I did. "Could you be any louder walking down the hall? I'm trying to rest," she'd snap, even when I was tiptoeing. "Do you really need to practice piano today? The noise is stressing me out." My attempts to help with preparations for the baby were dismissed as interference rather than assistance. When twins, Sophia and Samuel, were born just before I turned 12, the last pretense of me being part of the family seemed to evaporate. Dad was besotted with the babies, and Vanessa made it clear they were her priority. The dynamic in our home changed dramatically. Suddenly, my academic achievements, which Dad had always celebrated, were minimized. "That's nice that you got straight A's, Olivia, but could you keep it down? The twins are napping," became a common refrain. The twins' birthday parties were elaborate affairs with dozens of guests, professional entertainment, and custom cakes. My birthdays, by contrast, became increasingly modest. On my 14th birthday, Dad forgot entirely, until my grandmother called to wish me well. He apologized profusely and took me out for ice cream the next day, but the damage was done. I wasn't the priority anymore. I was an afterthought. By the time I was 16, I had learned to make myself scarce around the house. I joined every after-school activity I could, volunteered at the local library, and spent weekends with my grandmother. Dad occasionally expressed concern about how little time I spent at home, but he never pushed the issue. I think part of him recognized what was happening, but felt powerless to change it without risking his marriage. The Christmas I was 17 marked the turning point. It had always been my favorite holiday. Dad and I had traditions dating back to my earliest memories. We would bake cookies using my mother's recipes, watch classic holiday movies, and exchange one special gift on Christmas Eve. Even after Vanessa came into our lives, Dad had maintained these traditions with me, though sometimes they had to be scheduled around other commitments. That year, Vanessa announced that her sister's family would be joining us for Christmas, along with her parents. "It's important that the twins experience a proper family Christmas," she said, with a pointed look in my direction. I offered to help with the preparations, but was told everything was under control. When I asked about our traditional cookie baking, Dad looked uncomfortable. "Maybe we can do that next weekend, Liv. Things are just so hectic right now." On Christmas Eve, I came downstairs to find Dad and Vanessa watching It's a Wonderful Life, our movie, with the twins. "Oh, Olivia," Vanessa said, not bothering to pause the film, "could you make sure your room is tidy? My sister's kids will be staying there tomorrow night. You can sleep on the sofa in the den." "What?" I was confused. "But tomorrow's Christmas. I thought we were all having dinner here." There was an awkward silence before Dad spoke. "About that, sweetheart. Vanessa's made reservations at Le Bistro for tomorrow evening. It's just that with all the family coming, it seemed easier than cooking at home. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." "Okay," I said slowly. "What time should I be ready?" Another uncomfortable silence followed. Vanessa finally broke it. "The thing is, Olivia, they only had limited space available. With my parents, my sister's family, and of course the four of us, we're already at the maximum for their private dining room." I looked at my father, waiting for him to object, to say of course they wouldn't exclude me from Christmas dinner. Instead, he stared at the floor. "I'm really sorry, Liv. We thought maybe you could have dinner with your grandmother. I know she'd love to see you." "You're uninviting me from Christmas?" My voice sounded strange in my ears, thin and distant. "Don't be so dramatic," Vanessa sighed. "It's just dinner. You're welcome to join us for presents in the morning. And frankly, you've hardly been present in this family lately anyway, always off with your friends or at your grandmother's." I looked at my father, silently pleading with him to stand up for me, but he just looked sad and defeated. "I'll call Grandma in the morning," I said, turning to go back upstairs. "Olivia," Dad called after me, but I didn't turn around. I didn't want him to see the tears streaming down my face. That night, I made a decision that would alter the course of my life. I packed everything that mattered to me: clothes, books, the few pieces of jewelry I had inherited from my mother, my laptop, and a handful of photographs from happier times. I wrote a letter to my father explaining that I was going to stay with Grandma, that I couldn't keep pretending we were a family when it was so clear I wasn't wanted. I told him I loved him, but that I needed to remove myself from a situation that was causing me so much pain. Before dawn on Christmas morning, I called a taxi and left without saying goodbye. Dad called repeatedly once he discovered my letter, begging me to come home, saying we could work things out. But Vanessa's voice in the background, "For heaven's sake, James, she's being utterly ridiculous," confirmed I had made the right choice. My grandmother welcomed me with open arms. Unlike my father, she had never been blind to Vanessa's treatment of me. "I've been waiting for this day," she admitted as she helped me unpack. "I just hoped it wouldn't come to this." Living with Grandma changed everything. She was a retired professor of business with a no-nonsense attitude and a fierce belief in education as the path to independence. "Your father has failed you," she said bluntly, "but you will not fail yourself. We're going to make sure you have options in life." With her encouragement, I doubled down on my studies. I had always been a good student, but now I became exceptional. I graduated as valedictorian and earned a full scholarship to a prestigious university for business administration. Dad attended my graduation, without Vanessa or the twins, and tried to reconnect. Part of me wanted to embrace him, to recapture the close relationship we'd once had. But I couldn't forget how he had stood by while I was systematically pushed out of his life. "I'm proud of you, Liv," he said awkwardly after the ceremony, "and I'm so sorry about how things turned out. I never wanted you to feel unwelcome in your own home. But I did. I replied simply, "and you let it happen." He had no response to that, just a sad nod of acknowledgement. We agreed to try to maintain some contact. Occasional phone calls, maybe lunch now and then. It was better than nothing, but a far cry from the relationship we'd once shared. College was transformative. Away from the shadow of rejection that had clouded my teenage years, I flourished. I made true friends who valued me for exactly who I was. I excelled academically and discovered a passion for business strategy that surprised even me. Grandma beamed with pride at every accomplishment, large or small. During my sophomore year, Grandma was diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer. The prognosis was good, but the treatment was grueling. I considered taking a semester off to care for her, but she flatly refused. "You will not interrupt your education for anything," she insisted. I didn't raise a quitter. So instead, I accelerated my studies, taking extra classes and summer sessions so I could graduate early. Between classes, I would drive the 3 hours to be with her for treatments, bringing my textbooks to study while she dozed in the chemotherapy chair. Those drives became a time for reflection, for processing the pain of my childhood and adolescence, for deciding who I wanted to become. I graduated a year early, with honors and multiple job offers. I accepted a position with a venture capital firm that specialized in restaurant and hospitality investments. The work was demanding but exhilarating. I had an eye for potential, for seeing the diamond in the rough that could become a profitable enterprise with the right guidance and investment. By 25, I had risen to become the youngest partner in the firm's history. My specialty was identifying struggling but promising restaurants, developing turnaround strategies, and either selling them for a profit or maintaining them as income-generating investments. I had a knack for the business that even Grandma, now in remission and prouder than ever, found impressive. "You've taken life's lemons and made a lemonade empire," she joked when I showed her the waterfront condo I had purchased. It was more space than I needed, but after years of feeling unwelcome and making myself small, I wanted room to expand, to breathe, to own my success without apology. Through all of this, my relationship with my father remained distant but cordial. We spoke every few months, met for coffee perhaps twice a year. He would update me on the twins, now in middle school, both talented and confident in ways I had never been allowed to be in that house. I was genuinely happy for them. They were innocent in all of this, after all, but I maintained a polite distance. Dad occasionally hinted at wanting me to have a relationship with my half-siblings, but never pushed when I gently deflected. From snippets of conversation and the occasional social media glimpse, I had unfriended Vanessa years ago, but mutual acquaintances sometimes shared content. I gathered that their financial situation had become somewhat strained. Dad had been passed over for promotion several times, and Vanessa had left her job to, quote, focus on the children's development. The lavish lifestyle they had maintained while I was growing up, the one that had apparently had no room for expenses related to me, seemed to be showing cracks. I didn't take pleasure in their struggles, but I didn't feel particularly sympathetic either. I had built my life without their support. They would have to navigate their challenges without mine. Then came last Christmas. 5 years since the night I had packed my bags and left. Grandma had decided to spend the holidays on a cruise with her book club friends, a decision I had enthusiastically supported. After decades of putting family first, she deserved to prioritize her own joy. I had planned a quiet Christmas alone, perhaps catching up on work or binge-watching a new series. 3 days before Christmas, I received a text message from my father. "Liv, I know it's been a while, but we'd love to have you join us for Christmas dinner. The twins have been asking about you, and it would mean a lot to me. We have reservations at Le Bistro at 7 p.m. Please come." The irony wasn't lost on me. The same restaurant where I had been excluded years before. My first instinct was to decline, politely but firmly. But something made me hesitate. Perhaps it was curiosity about the twins, now almost teenagers. Perhaps it was a lingering hope that my father had finally found his backbone. Or perhaps it was simply that enough time had passed for the raw wound of rejection to have scabbed over into something less painful. After a day of consideration, I replied, "Thank you for the invitation, I'll be there." Simple, non-committal, but a step toward something, though I wasn't sure what. On Christmas Eve, I received an unexpected alert from our firm's investment tracking system. Le Bistro, that very restaurant, had just been listed for immediate sale. The owner, a client I had worked with briefly years before, had suffered a heart attack and his family was looking to liquidate quickly. The notification had come to me because of my previous connection and because the restaurant fit the profile of businesses I typically handled. I stayed up half the night reviewing the financials, the property values, the staff profiles, everything available about the restaurant. It was a solid business with an excellent location and a loyal clientele. The asking price was steep but fair. By morning, I had made my decision. I called our firm's managing partner, explained the situation, and received his blessing to make an offer. Not on behalf of the firm, but personally. By noon on Christmas Day, I had signed the preliminary paperwork. The restaurant would be mine, though the sale wouldn't be finalized or announced for several more days. I felt a strange mix of emotions, part triumph, part disbelief at my own audacity, part trepidation about the confrontation that might ensue. But mostly, I felt a sense of reclaiming something that had been taken from me. Not just a seat at a dinner table, but a sense of power over my own narrative. I dressed carefully for dinner. A sleek black dress, subtle but expensive jewelry, hair and makeup impeccable. This wasn't about flaunting my success, but about entering the situation with armor intact. I arrived exactly on time, handed my coat to the maître d', and took a deep breath before being led to the private dining room. The moment I walked into the private dining room, time seemed to freeze. My father, now with streaks of gray at his temples, stood up immediately, a cautious smile spreading across his face. Vanessa's expressions cycled rapidly from practiced politeness to surprise to something resembling alarm. The twins, Sophia and Samuel, looked up from their phones with mild curiosity. They had my father's eyes, I noticed with a pang. "Olivia," Dad said, his voice wavering slightly. "You came. I'm so glad." He moved as if to hug me, then seemed to think better of it, extending his hand instead. I took it briefly, maintaining the distance he had helped create years ago. "Thank you for the invitation," I replied evenly, turning to the twins. "You must be Sophia and Samuel. I've heard a lot about you." It wasn't entirely true. I'd heard snippets over the years, but nothing substantial. Still, social niceties had their place. They murmured polite hellos, clearly coached on basic manners, but uncertain about this half-sister who had materialized for Christmas dinner. I couldn't blame them for their awkwardness. In their minds, I was practically a stranger. "Please, sit," Vanessa said, gesturing to the empty chair furthest from her. We were just discussing the twins' school achievements. Sophia made the honor roll this semester, and Samuel has been selected for the elite basketball program. "Congratulations," I said sincerely. Whatever my feelings about their parents, the twins had done nothing wrong. "That's impressive." The conversation lurched forward unevenly, with Dad trying too hard to include me while Vanessa steered topics back to the twins at every opportunity. I answered questions about my work vaguely, mentioning only that I was in financial investments. No need to reveal my hand too early. As the appetizers arrived, I noticed small tells of financial strain that wouldn't be obvious to most. Vanessa's designer dress was from several seasons ago. Dad's watch, once a status symbol he'd proudly displayed, had been replaced with something far more modest. They ordered the second least expensive wine on the menu, rather than their usual premium selection. "So, Olivia," Vanessa said, setting down her fork with deliberate precision. "James tells me your grandmother is traveling for the holidays. How lovely for her to have that freedom at her age. Though I'm surprised you didn't join her, given how close you two are." The barb was subtle but unmistakable, a reminder of the division she had fostered, packaged as polite conversation. "Grandma deserves to enjoy her retirement," I replied smoothly. She worked incredibly hard her entire life, saved diligently, and now she's reaping the benefits of careful planning. Vanessa's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Yes, well, not everyone has the luxury of such uncomplicated lives. When you have a family to support, priorities necessarily shift." "I imagine they do," I agreed, maintaining eye contact just long enough to make her uncomfortable. "How is your design business going, Vanessa? Dad mentioned you started your own firm a few years ago." A flash of panic crossed her face before she recovered. "I've decided to step back temporarily to focus on the children's developmental needs." The business world will always be there, but these formative years won't come again. How true, I nodded, though we both knew her business had failed within 6 months. Information I'd gleaned not from Dad, but from industry connections, who remembered the spectacular flameout of her overpriced, under-delivering interior design venture. The main course arrived, momentarily pausing the delicate dance of conversation. I used the opportunity to observe the family dynamics more closely. Dad deferred to Vanessa on almost everything, from wine selection to how the twins should cut their meat. The twins, while polite, showed signs of the entitled upbringing I'd expected. Sophia sighed dramatically when her water wasn't refilled immediately, while Samuel played with his phone under the table despite being asked twice to put it away. Olivia has been very successful in her career, Dad said suddenly, perhaps sensing my assessment. Partner at her firm already. I always knew you had it in you, Liv. The use of my childhood nickname stung unexpectedly. He hadn't earned the right to that familiarity. Thank you, I said simply, not elaborating. Let him wonder about the details, the same way I'd had to wonder about his life for years. What exactly do you do? Samuel asked, looking up from his phone with genuine curiosity. The first I'd seen from either twin. I help businesses realize their potential, I said, deciding to engage. Sometimes that means finding investors for new ideas. Sometimes it means restructuring existing companies to make them more efficient. So you're like a business doctor, he said, nodding as if this made perfect sense. I smiled despite myself. Something like that. What about you? Beyond basketball, what interests you? As Samuel launched into an enthusiastic explanation of his interest in video game design, I caught Vanessa watching us with narrowed eyes. She didn't like this connection, however tenuous. I could practically see her calculating how to redirect the conversation. Speaking of careers, she interjected smoothly. We've been researching colleges for the twins. The caliber of schools they're considering is quite impressive, though of course the costs are daunting. Private education doesn't come cheap, but we believe in investing in their futures. And there it was, the reason for this sudden reunion. Not reconnection, not genuine regret, but financial need dressed up as family reconciliation. Education is certainly valuable, I agreed neutrally. I was fortunate that my academic performance earned me scholarships. The reminder that I had put myself through college without their help was intentional. Dad had the grace to look uncomfortable, but Vanessa pressed on. Scholarships are wonderful, of course, but they rarely cover everything. And with 2 gifted children to support simultaneously, we're exploring all avenues of assistance. I'm sure you are, I replied, taking a sip of water to hide my expression. The server appeared to clear our plates, and I used the moment to change the subject. This restaurant has always had exceptional food. I'm surprised you chose it for tonight, given the history. Dad nearly dropped his fork. History? The last Christmas dinner you planned here, I said calmly. The one I wasn't invited to. A heavy silence fell over the table. The twins exchanged confused glances. That was a different time, Dad finally said, his voice strained. We've all grown since then. Some of us more than others, I agreed. Vanessa's face had flushed an interesting shade of pink. That's ancient history, Olivia. Dwelling on past misunderstandings helps no one. We're family, after all. The word family in her mouth almost made me laugh. Are we? That's not the impression I've had for the past decade. People make mistakes, Dad said quietly. I've made many, and I regret them deeply. I should have been stronger, should have protected our relationship better. I failed you, Liv, and I'm sorry. For a moment, his sincerity caught me off guard. This was the conversation we should have had years ago, not in a public restaurant with Vanessa and the twins as audience. Perhaps we should discuss this another time, I suggested, unwilling to have this long overdue reckoning over dessert. No, I think it's important the children understand our family history, Vanessa said with sudden determination. Olivia, your father and I may have handled things imperfectly when you were younger, but we always had your best interests at heart. You were so independent, so capable. We knew you would thrive wherever you landed. The twins needed more nurturing, more attention. My carefully maintained composure threatened to crack. Is that what you tell yourselves? That you pushed me out because I was strong enough to handle it? Not because I was inconvenient to your perfect new family picture? That's not fair, Dad protested weakly. Isn't it? I countered. You allowed me to be systematically excluded from my own family. You stood by while I was made to feel unwelcome in my own home. And now, after years of minimal contact, you invite me to Christmas dinner at the very restaurant where you once decided I wasn't important enough to include, only to hint about college funds? Tell me what part isn't fair. The twins were watching with wide eyes, clearly witnessing a side of their family history they'd never been privy to before. Mom? Sophia looked to Vanessa, confusion written across her face. What is she talking about? Vanessa shot me a venomous look. Olivia has always had a flair for drama. There were complex family dynamics when she was a teenager that she's clearly misinterpreted. I left home at 17 because I was told in no uncertain terms that I wasn't a priority, I said directly to Sophia. I'm not sharing this to hurt you or your brother. None of this was your fault. But I won't sit here and pretend we're one big happy family when that's never been the case. Enough, Dad said, his voice firmer than I'd heard in years. Olivia, we invited you here to reconnect, not to rehash old wounds. Did you? I asked quietly. Or did you invite me because Vanessa has spent through your savings, your business ventures have failed, and you're realizing that private university for twins is beyond your means? The shocked silence confirmed my suspicions. The dessert menus arrived, an absurd punctuation to the tension gripping the table. Perhaps this was a mistake, Vanessa said coldly. I told James you wouldn't be able to move beyond the past. And I told your father we didn't need your help anyway, she continued, dropping all pretense of civility. We have options. James's parents have offered assistance, and there are plenty of loans available. We certainly don't need to beg. Vanessa, please, Dad interrupted, looking mortified. That's not what this evening was supposed to be about. Wasn't it? She challenged. You said yourself that reconnecting with Olivia could be beneficial for everyone. Don't pretend you weren't thinking about the twins' education. The naked truth hung in the air between us. I felt a strange sense of calm descend. This was exactly what I had expected. Yet the confirmation brought no satisfaction. I think I should go, I said, placing my napkin beside my plate and standing. Thank you for dinner. It was illuminating. Olivia, wait. Dad rose too, genuine distress on his face. Please don't leave like this. Why not? It's something of a family tradition, isn't it? The words were sharp, but my tone remained measured. Goodbye, Dad. Sophia, Samuel. It was nice to meet you properly. I wish you both the best. I walked out of the private dining room with my head high, ignoring Vanessa's hissed comments behind me. The maitre d' looked concerned as I approached the front desk. Is everything all right, miss? You're leaving before dessert. Everything is fine, I assured him. But I wonder if I might speak with Mr. Carlucci. I believe he's on the premises tonight. The owner? Yes, he's here, but he doesn't typically meet with guests unless there's a problem with the service. There's no problem, I smiled. Just tell him Olivia Reeves would like a word. We've done business together before. Curiosity piqued, he disappeared into the back office. Moments later, Antonio Carlucci emerged, his familiar weathered face breaking into a genuine smile when he saw me. Olivia, I didn't know you were dining with us tonight. Had I known, I would have come to greet you personally. It was a last-minute arrangement, I explained, accepting his European-style kiss on both cheeks. I understand congratulations are in order on the sale. His smile dimmed slightly. News travels fast in your industry, doesn't it? Yes, it's bittersweet. But after Marco's heart attack, the family agrees it's for the best. I'm too old to run this place alone, and none of the children have interest in the restaurant business. I'm sorry about Marco. How is he recovering? Well enough, thank God. But the doctor says no more 18-hour days in a hot kitchen. So here we are, selling our life's work. He sighed. At least the new owner seems to understand what we've built here. The lawyers have been very clear that staff will be retained, our signature dishes preserved. I nodded, a plan forming. About that, I'd like to make a special request of the new owner. Antonio looked puzzled. You know them, the lawyers have been very tight-lipped about who purchased the restaurant. I have it on good authority that the new owner would be amenable to a small favor. The family and the private dining room. I'd like their bill to be taken care of discreetly. A Christmas gift, if you will. Understanding dawned in his eyes. You're the buyer, aren't you? Marco mentioned the deal came together unusually quickly. I smiled enigmatically. The paperwork isn't finalized yet, so I'd appreciate your discretion. But yes, Le Bistro will be in good hands, I promise you that. Antonio shook his head, impressed. Always the quiet powerhouse. I remember when you helped us restructure our debt 5 years ago. Youngest consultant I'd ever seen, but sharper than most with decades more experience. He clapped his hands once decisively. Consider it done. Their bill is on the house tonight. Thank you, Antonio, and please pass my well wishes to Marco. I'll be in touch soon to discuss the transition in more detail. As I collected my coat and stepped into the crisp December night, I felt lighter than I had in years. The confrontation had gone much as expected, but the conclusion was entirely of my own making. No longer was I the unwanted child, excluded from the table. Now I owned the table, and everything around it. The next morning, Christmas Day proper, I woke early and went for a long run along the waterfront near my condo. The physical exertion helped clear my mind, processing the emotional aftermath of the previous night's dinner. By the time I returned home, showered, and made coffee, I had decided on my next steps. I called Grandma from her cruise ship, wishing her Merry Christmas and giving her an abbreviated version of the dinner and my impulsive purchase. She laughed that deep, throaty laugh I loved so much. Only you would buy an entire restaurant as a power move. I've taught you well. Too well, perhaps, I admitted. Part of me knows it was excessive. Nonsense, she dismissed. You made a sound business investment that happens to come with the satisfaction of watching your stepmother choke on her pride. That's what I call a win-win. After our call, I spent the day reviewing the preliminary paperwork for the restaurant purchase and drafting ideas for subtle improvements we could implement. The Le Bistro brand was strong, but there were opportunities to modernize certain aspects without losing the classic appeal that had made it successful for so long. My phone rang mid-afternoon. Dad's number. I let it go to voicemail, not ready for another confrontation so soon. His message was stilted, apologetic. Liv, about last night. There's no excuse for how things unfolded, or for the past, really. I hope we can talk again sometime. Merry Christmas. No mention of Vanessa or her obvious agenda. No acknowledgement of the deeper issues at play. Just a vague hope for reconciliation without the hard work of addressing the fundamental problems. Typical. What wasn't typical was the text that followed an hour later, from an unknown number. This is Samuel. Got your number from Dad's phone. Thanks for being honest last night. Never heard that side of things before. Also, thanks for paying for dinner. Dad said the restaurant comped the bill as a Christmas gesture, but the waiter winked when he said it so. Anyway, Merry Christmas. I smiled despite myself. Perhaps there was hope for at least one relationship within that family. I saved his number and replied simply, "The truth matters. Merry Christmas, Samuel." 3 days later, the sale of Le Bistro was finalized. I had decided to take a hands-off approach to management, retaining Antonio as general manager and Marco as consulting chef once his health permitted. Their expertise was invaluable, and my goal wasn't to reinvent the restaurant, but to preserve what made it special while strategically enhancing its profitability. I hadn't planned to make any public announcement about the ownership change. Restaurant acquisitions happened frequently in the city without much fanfare, but the local business journal got wind of the sale and requested an interview about a, quote, rising star in restaurant investment, making her first solo acquisition. The resulting article was modest but flattering, highlighting my track record with restaurant turnarounds and featuring a photo of me with Antonio in front of Le Bistro. It wasn't front-page news, but it circulated widely enough in local business circles. Dad called again the day the article was published. This time, I answered. "Le Bistro?" he said without preamble. "You bought Le Bistro?" "Yes," I confirmed simply. "It was an excellent investment opportunity." "But why that restaurant? Was it because of us? Because of Christmas Eve?" "Partially," I admitted. "The timing was coincidental. It had just been listed for sale that day, but I won't pretend there wasn't a certain poetic justice to the situation." He was quiet for a long moment. I don't know whether to be impressed or concerned about the level of… I don't know what to call it. Business acumen? I suggested. Strategic thinking? Financial independence? Take your pick. All of those, I suppose. He sighed heavily. "Vanessa is livid, by the way. Says you planned the whole thing to humiliate her." "That gives me far too much credit for clairvoyance," I replied dryly. "I didn't know you were having financial difficulties until I saw the signs at dinner. I certainly didn't arrange for the owner to have a heart attack and put the restaurant up for sale." "No, I suppose not." Another pause. "Liv, I know last night went terribly, but I meant what I said. I've made so many mistakes with you, choices I can never undo. I should have protected our relationship better. I should have stood up to Vanessa when she started pushing you out. I was weak, and you paid the price." The frank admission surprised me. "Yes, you were," I agreed, not softening the blow. "And yes, I did. Do you think there's any way forward from here? Any chance of rebuilding something between us?" I considered the question seriously. "I don't know, Dad. There's a lot of water under that bridge. A lot of years where you chose her comfort over my well-being. That's not something that disappears with one conversation or one apology." "I understand," he said, his voice heavy with resignation. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of what you've accomplished. You've become extraordinary, despite my failures. Or perhaps because of them." "I became who I am because of Grandma's belief in me," I corrected him gently. "And because I decided early on that my worth wasn't determined by how others treated me." A lesson I could have used, he admitted. "Listen, about the twins' college funds. That wasn't supposed to be the focus of the dinner. Vanessa took it there when things got tense." "But it was on the agenda," I pressed. He sighed. "Yes, eventually. We're stretched thin financially, and the twins have their hearts set on expensive schools. But that wasn't why I wanted to reconnect. I've missed you, Liv. More than I've allowed myself to admit all these years." The simple confession hit harder than I expected. Part of me, the wounded 17-year-old who had packed her bags in the dark, wanted to reject his overture outright. But the woman I had become recognized the courage it took to acknowledge such failures. "I appreciate your honesty," I said finally. "I can't promise anything, but perhaps we could try a coffee sometime. Just us. No Vanessa, no agenda beyond conversation." The relief in his voice was palpable. "I'd like that very much." After we hung up, I sat looking out at the water from my condo windows, thinking about the unexpected turns life takes. I had purchased Le Bistro in a moment of righteous indignation, a symbolic reclaiming of power. But perhaps the true power lay in deciding what relationships were worth salvaging, what boundaries needed maintaining, and what future I wanted to build. Not in reaction to past hurts, but in pursuit of genuine fulfillment. That evening, I received another text from Samuel. "Mom's freaking out about you buying the restaurant. It's kind of awesome. Can I ask you something about college? No pressure for money, just advice." I smiled and replied, "Happy to help with advice anytime. That's one resource I'm always willing to share." As I set my phone down, I realized that my impulsive purchase had opened doors I hadn't anticipated. Not just to business growth, but to relationships I had assumed were permanently closed. The restaurant that had once symbolized my exclusion had become, ironically, a point of reconnection. The path forward wasn't clear yet, and I harbored no illusions about an instant happy family reunion. Vanessa would likely remain antagonistic, and Dad had years of patterned behavior to overcome. But for the first time in a long time, I felt curious rather than closed off about the possibilities. The new year brought unexpected changes to my carefully structured life. What had begun as an impulsive act of revenge, buying Le Bistro, had evolved into something far more meaningful. The restaurant became not just a business investment, but a bridge between my past and present, opening doors I had long assumed were permanently closed. My first coffee meeting with Dad happened 2 weeks after Christmas, at a small cafe nowhere near Le Bistro. I arrived early, claiming a corner table and ordering a cappuccino to calm my nerves. When he walked in, I was struck by how much older he looked than at Christmas dinner. The gray more pronounced, his shoulders slightly stooped, his eyes carrying a weariness I hadn't noticed before. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, settling into the chair opposite mine. There was an awkward moment as we both searched for where to begin after so many years of distance. "How are things at home?" I asked finally, giving him an easy opening. He grimaced slightly. Tense. Vanessa's still processing the restaurant situation. She feels it was deliberately calculated to humiliate her. "And? What do you think?" I challenged gently. He considered the question seriously. "I think it was a brilliant business move that came with the satisfying side effect of reminding us that you're not the helpless teenager we pushed aside." A faint smile touched his lips. "And I can't honestly say we didn't deserve that reminder." His candor surprised me. "No deflection? No excuses?" "I'm too old and have made too many mistakes for more excuses," he admitted. "Watching you walk out of that restaurant on Christmas Eve, head high, completely in control while the rest of us were falling apart. It was like seeing your grandmother in her prime. It made me realize how much of her strength you've inherited, and how badly I've underestimated you." "Grandma would appreciate the comparison," I said, feeling a complex tangle of emotions at his words. "She's the one who taught me to convert pain into purpose." "She always was the wisest among us," he acknowledged. "Olivia, I need to say something, and I hope you'll hear me out." I nodded cautiously. "I failed you completely as a father," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of the words. "When I married Vanessa, I convinced myself that creating a normal family, one that looked like what I thought a family should be, was the most important thing. I told myself that you were strong, independent, capable of weathering the changes, but the truth is, I was weak. I chose the path of least resistance, the path that kept Vanessa happy, even when it came at your expense." He paused, collecting himself. "When you left that Christmas morning, I knew I had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I told myself I would make it right somehow. But then days turned to weeks to months, and the chasm between us seemed too vast to bridge. It was easier to focus on the twins, on Vanessa's demands, on the life directly in front of me, than to face the magnitude of what I had lost with you." I sat very still, absorbing his words. This was the conversation we should have had years ago, the accountability I had needed but never received. "Why now?" I asked. "After all this time, why the sudden self-awareness?" "It wasn't sudden," he replied. "It's been building for years. The twins are getting older, asking questions about you, about our family history. Samuel particularly. He's insatiably curious, much like you were at his age. He found old photo albums in the attic, pictures of you and me before Vanessa. He started asking why you weren't around, why we never talked about you." Dad smiled sadly. "I gave him the sanitized version at first, that you had gone to live with Grandma, that we had grown apart, but he kept pushing, in that persistent way teenagers have. And the more questions he asked, the more I had to confront the reality of what had happened." "And Vanessa allowed these conversations?" I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. "Allowed isn't the right word. She couldn't prevent them. Samuel is determined when he wants answers." Pride colored his tone momentarily. "And then your uncle mentioned your promotion at that family gathering, and it seemed like maybe the universe was offering a chance to at least try to make amends." "With strings attached," I reminded him. "The college funds." He winced. "That was Vanessa's agenda, not mine, though I can't claim I was entirely opposed to the idea. We are struggling financially, but reconnecting with you is my priority, I swear it." I studied him, weighing his sincerity. "I believe you want to believe that. I said finally. But I think it's more complicated. I think you saw an opportunity to potentially solve multiple problems at once. Ease your conscience, please your wife, and secure financial help for the twins. Instead of denying it, he surprised me again. You're probably right. I've never been good at separating my motivations cleanly. But regardless of the tangled reasons, I am genuinely sorry, Liv. Not just because you're successful now, or because we need help, but because I see clearly what I threw away. What I allowed to be taken from both of us. The raw honesty in his voice reached something deep inside me, not erasing the past, but acknowledging it in a way that felt like the first step toward genuine healing. I appreciate that, I said quietly. I can't promise what this looks like moving forward, but I'm willing to keep the door open. Small steps. Relief washed over his face. Small steps is more than I deserve, and more than I expected. As January progressed, those small steps continued. We met for coffee every other week, carefully rebuilding a connection that had been severed years before. Our conversations remained largely in safe territory. Work, current events, occasional reminiscences about positive memories from my childhood. We tacitly avoided discussing Vanessa, though I gathered from subtle comments that things remained strained at home. Meanwhile, Le Bistro flourished under the new ownership arrangement. Antonio's expertise combined with my business acumen created a partnership that respected the restaurant's heritage while implementing strategic improvements. We updated the reservation system, refreshed the cocktail menu, and launched a private dining experience that quickly became booked months in advance. Profits increased by nearly 30% in the first quarter, a vindication of my instincts about the restaurant's potential. In February, I received another text from Samuel. Got accepted to NYU and Columbia. Mom wants me to live at home and commute to save money. Would rather not. Any college advice? From someone who's been there. Our text exchanges had become increasingly frequent over the previous weeks. Never deep or personal, but friendly and consistent. I found myself looking forward to his messages, appreciating his sharp wit and thoughtful questions. Congratulations, both excellent schools, I replied. College is as much about independence and personal growth as academics. Living on campus, especially freshman year, creates bonds and experiences that shape your entire life path. Worth considering, if possible. His response came quickly. That's what I think too, but $$ is the issue. Dad mentioned you might be willing to talk more about college stuff sometime? No pressure. I hesitated, aware of the potential complications. Was this Samuel's genuine interest, or Vanessa working through her son to access my finances? After consideration, I decided to give him the benefit of the doubt. Happy to talk. Coffee this weekend? Just us. We met at a casual cafe near his high school that Saturday. Samuel arrived precisely on time, a lanky teenager with Dad's eyes and an earnestness that reminded me of myself at his age. Thanks for meeting me, he said, sliding into the booth with an iced coffee. And, sorry if this is weird. I know things are complicated with our family. Complicated is one word for it, I agreed with a wry smile. But I'm glad we're talking. Congratulations again on your acceptances. Those are impressive schools. He beamed with genuine pride. Thanks, I've worked really hard. Columbia's my first choice. Their computer science program is exactly what I want. But Mom's freaking out about the cost. College is expensive, I acknowledged. Have you looked into scholarships? Financial aid packages? Some, but we're in that awkward middle zone. On paper, my parents make too much to qualify for need-based aid, but in reality, there's not enough for the full ride. He hesitated, then added, Dad said they made some bad investments a few years back. Mom's design business thing failed, and they took out a second mortgage to try to save it. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral despite the internal vindication of having my suspicions confirmed. That's a tough position to be in. Yeah. He fidgeted with his straw. Look, I'm not asking you for money. I know that would be super weird given everything, but I was hoping maybe you could help me figure out scholarship strategies, or work-study options. You put yourself through college, right? Dad mentioned that. The sincerity in his request touched me. This wasn't Vanessa's manipulation. This was a bright young man trying to navigate a difficult situation with maturity beyond his years. I confirmed. Scholarships, student loans, and working 20 hours a week at the campus library. It wasn't easy, but it taught me a lot about self-reliance and resource management, skills that have served me well in my career. For the next hour, we talked strategy. Which scholarship applications had the best return on time investment? How to leverage his computer skills for campus jobs that paid above minimum wage? The importance of networking with professors for research assistant positions. I shared mistakes I'd made and lessons learned, and he took notes with an intensity that was both familiar and poignant. As our meeting wound down, Samuel looked at me with unexpected vulnerability. "Can I ask you something personal? You can totally not answer if it's too much." "You can ask," I said cautiously. "Do you hate my mom because of how she treated you?" The directness of the question caught me off guard. "Hate is a strong word," I said carefully. "I think your mother and I have very different values and priorities. She made choices that hurt me deeply, and your father allowed those choices to stand. But hate requires energy and attention I'm not willing to give her anymore." He nodded thoughtfully. "That's fair. She says you're vindictive and calculating. That buying the restaurant proves it." I couldn't help but laugh. I suppose from her perspective, that makes sense. But the truth is, Le Bistro was a sound business decision that happened to come with a side of satisfying irony. If I were truly vindictive, I could have done far more than simply purchase a restaurant. "Like what?" he asked, curiosity evident. "That's a conversation for another time," I smiled. "Perhaps when you're older." He rolled his eyes good-naturedly. Adults always say that. As we parted ways, Samuel surprised me with a quick, awkward hug. "Thanks for not treating me like I'm just an extension of Mom. Some of the family does that. Assumes I think like her or something." "You're your own person," I told him firmly. Never let anyone reduce you to a reflection of your parents, good or bad parts. The genuine connection with Samuel shifted something in my perspective. For years, I had viewed the twins as abstract concepts rather than real people with their own thoughts, dreams, and challenges. They had been symbols of my replacement, the children deemed more deserving of family resources and attention. But Samuel, at least, was emerging as a thoughtful young man caught in circumstances not of his making, much as I had been at his age. This realization prompted me to reach out to Sophia as well, sending a friendly text congratulating her on her honor roll achievement. Her response was polite but reserved, nowhere near Samuel's enthusiastic engagement. I respected the boundary, letting her know the door was open if she ever wanted to talk, but not pushing for a relationship she wasn't ready for. In March, I invited Dad to Le Bistro for lunch, the first time we'd met there since the ownership change. I arranged for us to sit in Antonio's office rather than the main dining room, wanting privacy for what I anticipated might be a difficult conversation. "This is surreal," Dad commented as we settled in with our meals. "My daughter owns the restaurant that once symbolized her exclusion from the family. There's a Greek tragedy in there somewhere." "Or a redemption story," I countered, "depending on how you look at it." He smiled faintly. "Always the optimist, despite everything. You get that from your mother." The mention of my mother, rare in our conversations, created an opening I decided to pursue. "Dad, I want to talk about the financial situation with the twins' education." His expression immediately tensed. "Olivia, I haven't brought that up again, because I don't want you to think that's why I'm rebuilding our relationship. Whatever you decide about that is entirely separate from—" I held up a hand to stop him. "I know, that's not what this is about. But Samuel and I have been talking, and I understand the position you're in with Columbia's tuition costs." "He told you about Columbia?" Surprise colored his voice. "We've been trying to steer him toward the state university. It's what we can afford." "He's set on their computer science program," I said. "And from what I've researched, it would be an excellent fit for his interests and abilities." It would be a shame to limit his options because of financial constraints. Dad sighed heavily. Many families face these difficult choices, Liv. We made financial mistakes that have consequences. Samuel will get a good education regardless. What if there were another option? I asked carefully. One that doesn't involve me simply writing a check, which would understandably come with complicated feelings on all sides? His curiosity was piqued. What kind of option? I've been considering establishing a scholarship fund, I explained, through my firm, focused on supporting students pursuing business technology and hospitality education, merit-based, but with financial need as a secondary consideration. And Samuel would qualify for this scholarship? Dad asked, understanding dawning. If he applied and met the criteria, yes. The selection committee would be independent. I wouldn't directly choose recipients, but I would ensure the parameters were defined in a way that would make him a strong candidate. Dad was quiet for a long moment. That's incredibly generous and thoughtful in how it's structured. But why? After everything that happened, why would you do this? I considered my answer carefully. Several reasons. First, I believe in Samuel's potential. He reminds me of myself at his age. Driven, curious, determined to create his own path. Second, I know firsthand how educational opportunities can change the trajectory of a life. And third, I paused, making sure I meant what I was about to say. I don't want to perpetuate the cycle of withholding support that I experienced. I want to be better than that. Dad's eyes grew suspiciously bright. You are better. You always have been. Not always, I admitted. Buying this restaurant wasn't just a business decision. There was an element of wanting to prove something, to make a point in a way I knew would sting. A point that needed making, he acknowledged, and delivered with far more grace than we deserved. We finished our lunch, discussing the practical details of the scholarship proposal. As we were preparing to leave, Dad asked hesitantly, "Does this mean you might be open to joining us for Easter? A family dinner. Not here. Somewhere neutral. Sophia has been asking questions about you since Samuel started talking about your meetings." The invitation triggered an instinctive wariness. And Vanessa? Is she suddenly eager for my company too? Vanessa is coming to terms with reality, he said diplomatically. Samuel's determination to attend Columbia has forced some difficult conversations about finances and priorities. She's realizing that the estrangement from you has consequences beyond the emotional. So I'm useful now, I observed, unable to keep the edge from my voice. To her, perhaps initially, he admitted with surprising candor. But Sophia's interest is genuine. She found your old ballet recital videos in the attic and has been watching them obsessively. Did you know she dances too? Has since she was 4. The information landed like a small revelation, a connection I hadn't known existed. I didn't know that. There's a lot you don't know about them, and they don't know about you. Maybe it's time to change that, on whatever terms feel right to you. I promise to consider the invitation, neither committing nor refusing outright. As I watched Dad leave the restaurant, I reflected on how dramatically circumstances had shifted in just a few months. The purchase that had begun as an act of defiance had catalyzed a series of conversations and connections I couldn't have anticipated. That evening, I called Grandma, now back from her cruise, and settled into her routine of book clubs, garden society meetings, and gentle yoga classes. I filled her in on the scholarship idea and Dad's Easter invitation. So, she said when I'd finished, "You're considering breaking bread with the woman who pushed you out of your own home? That's either tremendous personal growth or masochism, depending on how you look at it." I laughed at her characteristic bluntness. Maybe a bit of both. I'm not doing it for Vanessa. I'm doing it for the twins. And maybe for myself too. How so? I'm tired of being defined by that rejection, I explained, articulating something I hadn't fully recognized until that moment. For years, being the excluded daughter was part of my identity. It fueled my drive, shaped my independence. But I'm more than that now. I don't want that old pain to limit who I can become or what relationships I can build. Grandma mused. There's wisdom in that. Just don't mistake moving forward for erasing the past. Vanessa showed you who she was quite clearly. People rarely change their fundamental nature. I don't expect her to change, I assured her. This isn't about forgiveness or pretending nothing happened. It's about deciding that the past doesn't get to dictate my future choices. Well then, she said, approval warming her voice, I'd say you've learned the most important lesson I tried to teach you. Life isn't about what happens to you. It's about what you choose to create from it. After our call, I stood on my condo balcony watching the city lights reflect on the water. The restaurant that had once symbolized my exclusion had become the unexpected catalyst for reconnection. The family that had once pushed me away was cautiously opening doors to new possibilities. I thought about Samuel's determination to chart his own educational path, Sophia's newfound curiosity about the half-sister she barely knew, Dad's belated but seemingly genuine accountability. Even Vanessa's reluctant recognition that burning bridges had consequences felt like a form of justice more satisfying than any revenge I could have orchestrated. The scholarship fund idea had come to me gradually over the previous weeks, evolving from a vague notion to a concrete plan. It represented everything I believed in: educational opportunity, meritocracy, the power of investment in human potential. That it would benefit Samuel directly was a bonus. But the true value lay in creating a legacy that extended beyond personal grievances. I texted Samuel, thinking about coming to Easter dinner. What's your opinion? Good idea or disaster waiting to happen? His response came quickly. Definitely come. Dad's excited, Sophia's curious, Mom's practicing her fake smile. Could be entertaining at minimum, healing at best. Plus, I make excellent deviled eggs. I smiled at his assessment. Deviled eggs might tip the scales. I'll think about it. As I prepared for bed that night, I realized I had reached a turning point. The purchase of Le Bistro had begun as a powerful statement about who I had become: successful, independent, capable of turning tables on those who had once dismissed me. But the true power wasn't in ownership of a building or business. It was in reclaiming the narrative of my own life. I didn't need to be defined by rejection anymore. I could choose connection on my own terms, with boundaries intact and expectations clear. I could extend opportunities without erasing accountability. I could build something new without pretending the past hadn't happened. The restaurant had been just the beginning, a dramatic opening chapter in a story that was still being written, one choice at a time. The week before Easter, I found myself standing in the doorway of Le Bistro's kitchen during the afternoon lull, watching the staff prepare for the evening service. The rhythmic chopping of vegetables, the sizzle of sauces reducing, the quiet concentration on each chef's face. There was something meditative about witnessing this daily ritual that had continued uninterrupted despite the change in ownership. Miss Reeves? Antonio approached, clipboard in hand. The renovations for the private dining room are ready for your final approval. I followed him through the restaurant to what had once been an underutilized storage area adjacent to the main private dining room, the very room where my exclusion from family Christmas had occurred years before. Now transformed with warm lighting, elegant wood paneling, and a state-of-the-art sound system, the space radiated intimate sophistication. It's perfect, I told Antonio, running my hand along the custom-built table that could accommodate up to 12 guests. Exactly what I envisioned. And the name? Have you decided? I nodded, a small smile playing at my lips. Call it the Eleanor Room, after my grandmother. Excellent choice, he approved. We already have 3 bookings for next month, even though we haven't formally announced its availability. Word travels fast among our regular clientele. As I left the restaurant that afternoon, I felt a sense of completion that went beyond business satisfaction. The Eleanor Room represented something deeply personal, taking a space connected to painful memories and transforming it into something beautiful and welcoming. It felt symbolic of the journey I'd been on these past months. My phone chimed with a text from Samuel. Mom's freaking out about Easter menu. Apparently your presence requires elevated culinary offerings, whatever that means. Should I tell her you own a restaurant and probably won't be impressed by her attempt at coq au vin? I laughed out loud. Please don't antagonize her on my account. Tell her I'm easy to please. Just no mushrooms. Roger that. No fungi for the fun guy. that's you, in case my brilliant wordplay wasn't clear. Closing parenthesis, quote. His quick wit and easy manner had become a bright spot in my life, an unexpected gift from this complicated family reconnection. We'd met for coffee twice more since our initial meeting, each conversation strengthening the sibling bond that was developing between us. There was something deeply satisfying about forming this relationship on our own terms, untainted by the family dynamics that had shaped my earlier years. Sophia remained more distant, though Samuel reported she was, quote, 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 intrigued by the prospect of getting to know me. I respected her caution, understanding that from her perspective, I was essentially a stranger who had suddenly appeared in their lives, causing tension between their parents. I had sent her a few casual texts, keeping the door open without applying pressure. Dad and I had settled into a comfortable rhythm of weekly coffee meetings, gradually moving from safe topics to more meaningful conversations about our shared past and the years of separation. He had begun to speak more openly about the mistakes he felt he'd made in his marriage, though I was careful not to position myself as his confidant regarding current marital troubles. That was a boundary I needed to maintain for my own well-being. The day before Easter, I received a surprising email from Vanessa, the first direct communication from her since the Christmas confrontation. The subject line read simply, "Tomorrow. Olivia," it began without preamble, "James and the children are looking forward to your visit tomorrow. I want to be clear that while I may not fully understand your recent involvement in our family's life, I am willing to maintain civility for everyone's benefit. I'd appreciate the same courtesy from you. Dinner will be served at 4 p.m., no gifts necessary." The terse message made me smile despite its coolness. Classic Vanessa, attempting to establish control through formality, yet unable to resist the passive-aggressive final line. I drafted several responses ranging from equally cool to deliberately warm, before settling on simple and direct. "Thank you for the invitation, Vanessa. I look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow at 4 p.m. Easter Sunday dawned bright and clear, a perfect spring day. I spent the morning helping with a community breakfast at the homeless shelter, where I volunteered monthly, a grounding practice that helped me maintain perspective on what truly mattered in life. By the time I returned home to shower and change for family dinner, I felt centered and ready for whatever the afternoon might bring. I chose my outfit carefully, a soft blue dress that was elegant without being ostentatious, paired with simple jewelry and comfortable heels. I wanted to look polished, but not as if I was trying to make a statement. The bottle of wine I selected followed the same principle. Excellent quality, but not showy, something that would complement a meal without overshadowing it. As I drove to Dad and Vanessa's house, a suburban colonial I had once called home, memories flooded back with unexpected intensity. The basketball hoop, where Dad and I had played horse on weekend mornings. The oak tree I had climbed, despite repeated warnings about falling. The bay window, where I had spent countless hours reading while waiting for Dad to return from work. I paused in the driveway, taking a deep breath before approaching the front door. Before I could ring the bell, it swung open to reveal Samuel, grinning widely. "You came!" he exclaimed, as if he had half expected me to change my mind. "And you're right on time, which is already better than Mom's side of the family. They're always at least 30 minutes late to everything." "Punctuality is a virtue in the business world," I replied, returning his smile as I stepped inside. "And I brought wine." "Very adult of you," he approved, taking the bottle. Dad's in the living room having mild anxiety, Sophia's upstairs changing her outfit for the 4th time, and Mom's in the kitchen pretending she doesn't need help, while silently fuming that no one is helping. His candid assessment of the family dynamics made me laugh. Quite the welcoming committee. Should I start with Dad or brave the kitchen? Dad first, he advised. Mom needs at least one more glass of cooking wine before she's ready for direct interaction. The house had changed in the years since I'd left. New furniture, different paint colors, art I didn't recognize on the walls. But the underlying structure remained familiar, and muscle memory guided me to the living room where Dad stood looking out the window, hands clasped behind his back. He turned at my entrance, relief washing over his features. "You came." I said I would, I replied simply, accepting his awkward half-hug. Still, I wouldn't have blamed you for changing your mind. He gestured to the sofa. Can I get you a drink? Water? Wine? Something stronger? Water for now, I said, settling onto the edge of the couch. How are you holding up? He gave a rueful smile. About as well as can be expected. Vanessa's been cooking since dawn. Sophia can't decide what to wear. And I've been walking around trying to look useful while actually just staying out of everyone's way. Some things never change, I observed, remembering similar holiday scenes from years past. And some things change entirely, he countered softly, handing me a glass of water. Having you here again, it's something I didn't dare hope for. Before I could respond, Sophia appeared in the doorway, her expression a mixture of curiosity and wariness. She had Dad's eyes and Vanessa's elegant bearing, dressed in a stylish outfit that suggested careful consideration. Hi, she said simply, hovering at the threshold. I stood, offering a warm smile. Hello, Sophia, it's good to see you. You too, she replied automatically, then added with more genuine feeling. I mean, properly. Not just at that weird Christmas dinner. Samuel appeared behind her. Where Mom tried to shake down Olivia for college money and didn't realize she was about to become our landlord's tenant. Samuel! Dad admonished, but I couldn't help laughing. That's one way to summarize it, I acknowledged. Though I prefer to think of it as a fortuitous business opportunity with a side of karmic timing. Sophia's lips twitched in a suppressed smile. Mom said we're not supposed to mention the restaurant thing. Of course she did, I replied dryly. Well, consider it unmentioned. How's your dancing going? Dad mentioned you're quite dedicated to ballet. Her face lit up at the subject change. You know about that? I'm training for summer intensives now. My teacher thinks I might have a shot at the National Academy program if I keep progressing. That's impressive, I said sincerely. I took ballet until I was about 15, but never at that level. Mom found videos of your recitals, she admitted. You were really good. The simple compliment created an unexpected lump in my throat. Thank you. I loved it. But other priorities took over. Like becoming a business tycoon who buys restaurants to intimidate her enemies? Samuel suggested with mock innocence. This time, both Dad and I scolded him, though I couldn't quite hide my amusement. There was something refreshing about his willingness to address the elephant in the room directly rather than tiptoeing around it. Speaking of the kitchen, Dad interjected, perhaps we should check if Vanessa needs any help. The kitchen, like the rest of the house, had been updated since my time there. Gleaming stainless steel appliances, marble countertops, a large center island where Vanessa stood arranging a charcuterie board with meticulous precision. She looked up as we entered, her expression carefully neutral. Olivia? You're here. She set down the knife she was using. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the invitation, I replied with equal formality. Can I help with anything? She hesitated, clearly torn between maintaining control of her domain and accepting the olive branch. You could finish this board while I check on the lamb, she decided, stepping aside. I took her place at the island, aware of the subtle power shift in the simple act of being allowed to contribute to the meal. The twins hovered nearby, watching this tentative dance between their mother and half-sister with undisguised interest. Mom's been cooking all day, Sophia volunteered. She made all your favorites, Dad. The pointed reminder of who the meal was truly centered around wasn't lost on me, but I chose not to react. Instead, I focused on arranging the cheeses and meats with the same care Vanessa had shown. It smells wonderful, I offered genuinely. I remember holidays here always featured impressive meals. Vanessa acknowledged the compliment with a brief nod as she basted the lamb. James mentioned you've had some success in the restaurant industry recently. The deliberate understatement, some success to describe owning one of the city's premier dining establishments, nearly made me smile. Yes, it's been an interesting new venture. Different from my usual investment portfolio, but rewarding in unexpected ways. I'm sure, she replied, a hint of acidity in her tone. Samuel, Please set the dining room table. Sophia, the water glasses need filling. As the twins moved to comply, Dad stepped in smoothly. Olivia, I never properly asked, how did you come to purchase Le Bistro? Was it something you'd been considering for a while? The question hung in the air, loaded with unspoken history. Vanessa's hands stilled momentarily over the roasting pan. Actually, it was quite serendipitous, I answered truthfully. The owner had a health crisis and needed to sell quickly. The restaurant has always had excellent fundamentals: strong location, loyal clientele, distinctive menu. From a purely business perspective, it was an opportunity too good to pass up. And from a non-business perspective? Vanessa asked, unable to resist the bait. I met her gaze directly. From a personal perspective, there was a certain symmetry to it that appealed to me. A tense silence followed, broken by Samuel's return. Tables set. Are we doing the fancy napkin folds, or just the regular ones? Regular is fine, Vanessa answered, still watching me. Olivia, perhaps you'd like to open the wine you brought? James, the corkscrew is in the drawer by the refrigerator. The simple task diffused some of the tension, and by the time we all gathered around the dining table, a fragile civility had been established. The meal itself was undeniably delicious. Roast lamb with mint sauce, scalloped potatoes, fresh asparagus, and homemade rolls that filled the room with their yeasty aroma. Conversation remained carefully pleasant through the first course, focusing on safe topics like the twins' school activities and Dad's recent golf game. I contributed where appropriate, but primarily observed the family dynamics. The way Vanessa subtly dominated conversations, how Dad deferred to her on most subjects, the twins' practiced navigation of their parents' expectations. It was during dessert, a lemon tart that Vanessa announced was made from scratch, that Samuel decided to disrupt the careful equilibrium. So, he said, setting down his fork, are we going to talk about the college thing? Or just pretend that's not why we're all sitting here trying not to mention elephants? Samuel, Vanessa hissed, while Dad closed his eyes briefly in resignation. I set down my own fork, oddly grateful for the direct approach. It's a fair question. It's an inappropriate question, Vanessa countered. We invited Olivia for Easter dinner as family, not to discuss financial matters. Really? Samuel challenged. Because you've spent the last month talking about nothing except how we can't afford Columbia, and how unfair it is that some people have more resources than they need while others struggle. An uncomfortable silence descended on the table. Sophia studied her dessert with sudden fascination. Dad looked torn between admonishing Samuel and acknowledging the truth of his statement. Perhaps this is a conversation better had directly, I suggested calmly. Vanessa, I understand the twins are facing significant college expenses, and that finances are tight for your family right now. I've been considering ways I might help that wouldn't create unhealthy dependencies or expectations. Vanessa's expression cycled through surprise, suspicion, and calculation. That's very generous of you to consider, she said finally. Though I'm not sure what you mean by unhealthy dependencies. I mean that simply writing checks for tuition wouldn't be beneficial for anyone involved, I clarified. It would create an imbalanced dynamic and potentially foster resentment on all sides. So what are you suggesting? She asked cautiously. I outlined the Scholarship Foundation concept I had discussed with Dad previously, explaining how it would be structured through my firm with independent selection criteria, though designed with parameters that would likely benefit the twins if they applied. This way, I concluded, they would earn the support through their own merit, rather than receiving it as a handout. The foundation would support other deserving students as well, creating a broader positive impact beyond our family situation. Samuel was nodding enthusiastically. That's perfect. We'd still have to work for it, but we'd have a shot at the schools we really want. It's an interesting proposal, Vanessa acknowledged, her tone measured, though I'm curious why you would go to such lengths. Setting up a foundation is considerably more complex than simply helping family directly. The question was revealing. She couldn't quite grasp why I would choose a solution that extended beyond their immediate needs to benefit others as well. Because this isn't just about money, I explained. It's about creating something meaningful from a difficult family history. The scholarship represents what I believe in, that education creates opportunity, that merit should be rewarded, and that we can transform challenges into broader positive impact. Dad reached over to squeeze my hand briefly. It's an incredibly thoughtful solution, Liv, one that honors your values while addressing a practical need. I think it's awesome, Sophia spoke up unexpectedly. And really smart. Like, turning something negative into something that helps lots of people. Vanessa looked between her children, clearly recognizing she was outnumbered. Well, she said finally, it would certainly solve the immediate issue of tuition costs. When would this scholarship be available? I've already begun the paperwork, I replied. It should be operational in time for fall admissions decisions. I see. She smoothed her napkin carefully. That's very efficient of you. Efficiency is valuable in business, I noted mildly. An awkward silence followed, broken when Dad suggested moving to the living room for coffee. As everyone began clearing dishes, Vanessa motioned me toward the kitchen pantry, away from the others. A moment, please, she requested, her voice low. I followed, curious and slightly wary. Once we were alone, she turned to face me directly. I want to be clear about something, she began. I don't expect us to become close. Too much has happened, and frankly, we are very different people with different priorities. I agree completely, I replied, oddly relieved by her candor. However, she continued, I recognize that your relationship with James is important to him, and now you're developing connections with the twins as well. For their sakes, I am willing to establish a functional civility between us. Functional civility, I repeated, suppressing a smile at the corporate-sounding term. That seems reasonable. She nodded briskly. And regarding this scholarship proposal, I appreciate the consideration that went into designing a solution that preserves everyone's dignity. It's more thoughtful than I might have expected. Coming from Vanessa, this qualified as effusive praise. Thank you. I believe it serves everyone's interests while creating something positive for others as well. Yes, well, she straightened an already perfectly aligned row of spice jars. I suppose that's the sort of thinking that has made you successful in business. Among other things, I agreed. She hesitated, then added with visible effort. The restaurant, purchasing Le Bistro, it was well played. I wouldn't have expected that level of strategic thinking from you. The backhanded compliment made me laugh despite myself. Life is full of surprises, Vanessa. Perhaps we've both underestimated each other in different ways. A flash of something like respect crossed her features before she reverted to her usual composed expression. Perhaps, shall we join the others? As we returned to the living room, I observed the scene with fresh eyes. Dad pouring coffee, the twins arguing good-naturedly about a shared inside joke, the afternoon sunlight streaming through windows that had once framed a different chapter of my life. This wasn't a perfect reconciliation, nor was it the warm family reunion that movies might depict. It was messy, complicated, laden with history both spoken and unspoken, but it was real, and there was something powerful in that reality, in choosing to engage with the complexity rather than avoiding it, in finding ways to move forward without erasing the past. Over the next several months, the Scholarship Foundation took shape, formally launching as the Eleanor Reeves Foundation for Educational Excellence, in honor of my grandmother. The first round of recipients included both twins, Samuel for Columbia's computer science program and Sophia for a joint dance and business program at NYU. 10 other students from diverse backgrounds also received support, each demonstrating exceptional promise and financial need. The foundation's inaugural reception was held, fittingly, in the Eleanor Room at Le Bistro. Grandma, resplendent in a vibrant blue suit that matched her spirited personality, held court at the center table, regaling the young scholarship recipients with stories of her own unconventional educational journey. Education isn't just about degrees or institutions, she told them, her voice carrying the weight of decades of wisdom. It's about learning to transform challenges into opportunities, about developing the resilience to turn rejection into redirection. Remember that the most important lessons rarely come from textbooks. I watched from across the room as Dad approached her cautiously, Their relationship had been strained for years due to his handling of my situation. To my surprise, she embraced him warmly, whispering something in his ear that made him both laugh and wipe away a tear. Vanessa, who had reluctantly attended at the twins' insistence, maintained her promised functional civility throughout the evening, even managing a genuine-seeming compliment about the restaurant's recent recognition in a prestigious dining guide. As the event wound down, I found myself alone in the main dining room, reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this moment. The restaurant that had once symbolized my exclusion now represented something entirely different, not just a business success, but a transformed narrative. Samuel found me there, 2 dessert plates in hand. "Thought you might want the chef's special. You've barely eaten all night. Too busy making sure everyone else was taken care of." I accepted the plate gratefully. "Good observation. You'd make an excellent restaurant manager." "Nah," he grinned. "But I might take you up on that summer internship at your firm." "I want to understand how all this works." He gestured vaguely at the restaurant and beyond. "How you built this life for yourself." "One decision at a time," I told him honestly. "Some driven by pain, others by hope." The trick is learning to let the hope outweigh the pain in making those choices. He nodded thoughtfully. "You know, I used to wonder why we never talked about you when I was growing up. Now I get it. You weren't just a person to mom and dad. You were a reminder of their mistakes, of the consequences of their choices." "That's surprisingly insightful," I acknowledged. He shrugged. "I've had a lot of time to think about family dynamics lately. And I wanted to thank you, not just for the scholarship, but for coming back at all. For being willing to create something new instead of just writing us all off. Family is complicated," I said simply, "but I've learned that choosing connection, even with clear boundaries, creates more possibilities than choosing isolation." Later that night, after all the guests had departed and the restaurant staff had cleaned up, I sat alone in the Eleanor room, savoring the quiet satisfaction of a vision realized. The space that had once excluded me had been transformed into a place of welcome, not just for me but for others seeking opportunity and growth. My phone chimed with a text from Grandma. "Proud doesn't begin to cover it, my girl. You've taken the hardest parts of your story and alchemized them into gold. Not many have that gift." I smiled at her perfect summation. That was exactly what it felt like, a kind of alchemy. Transforming rejection into purpose, exclusion into expansion, pain into possibility. The restaurant purchase that had begun as an impulsive act of defiance had catalyzed something far more meaningful than I could have anticipated. It wasn't about revenge or even vindication in the end. It was about reclaiming the power to write my own story, to define family and success and belonging on my own terms. As I switched off the lights and prepared to leave, I paused in the doorway, remembering the frightened, hurt 17-year-old who had packed her bags in the dark all those years ago. I wished I could tell her that the pain she felt then would eventually lead to this moment. Not despite the rejection she experienced, but because of how she chose to respond to it. Some people spend their lives defined by what they've lost, or what was taken from them. Others use those same losses as foundation stones to build something new, something stronger, something that extends beyond themselves to create value for others. The choice had always been mine, and I had chosen to build,